Panama Canal is also suffering from major disruption as many fewer ships are now getting through.
For over a century, the Panama Canal has helped empower global trade, as there is arguably no other way to transport goods from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. But now, change is on the horizon, as Mexico is about to open a new project, the interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. That is quite a mouthful of words, we know, but what exactly is this? And how exactly will it change the future of ocean travel? Join us as we explore Mexico's $4.5 billion Panama Canal rival. The Panama Canal explained. Before we dive into the Mexican interoceanic corridor, let us first address the Panama Canal, along with the Suez Canal. It is probably the most famous artificial waterway on the face of the earth. It cuts through the Isthmus of Panama. It is not every day one gets to come across the word isthmus, so we will be explaining its meaning. An isthmus is a strip of land that connects two larger land masses. The Isthmus of Panama links North America to South America, with both the Atlantic and Pacific on either side. The isthmus is about 65 kilometers wide. That happens to also be the length of the Panama Canal, which is relatively short. The Suez Canal is almost 3 times as long, while the Grand Canal of China is quite incredibly more than 20 times long. But what the Panama Canal lacks in terms of size, it makes up for it in terms of its importance. Before 1914, when the Panama Canal was constructed, it was extremely difficult for cargo ships to travel from one side to another. Transporting goods was a total pain, as to transport goods from Europe to be sold in California, one must first sail through Chile, cut through the Strait of Magellan, and then sail all the way north again. What a tedious process. If the ship was first enough, it could get the trip done in a few weeks, but the average standard ship would take months, not to mention how risky it was. The Strait of Magellan always experienced some serious storms and crazy currents, which made it dangerous waters to ply. The only other option, the Northwest Passage at the top of the Americas, was clogged by ice for most of the year, thus making it impossible for ships to navigate. In the year 1902, God's own country, the United States of America, decided to do something about it. They drew up a plan to build a shipping canal in Central America. This new canal would not only make traveling less risky, but it would also make it way faster. It would take less than a day for a ship to navigate, and it would slash the journey from the Atlantic to the Pacific by a distance of 12,000 kilometers. That takes away a few good weeks of travel. But everything is easier said than done. In theory, this was perfect, but to build it was not an easy task. Laborers had to use dynamite, drills, and steam-powered shovels to clear more than 200 million cubic meters of earth. Just to put such numbers into perspective, if all the rubble were to be piled up in a great mountain fashion, it would be 80 times bigger in volume than the great edifices of the pyramids of Giza, and almost 2 times taller than the Empire State Building. All that rubble could have been a man-made mountain. As if unearthing the rubbles wasn't hard work enough, the laborers had to work under some extreme conditions. They found themselves working in temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius or more. The building of this canal also claimed the lives of workers. Almost 6,000 workers lost their lives, some due to heat stroke, but also due to rock slides and occasionally tropical diseases. The history of this canal is one stained with the blood of the innocents, and all in all, the building was not a fun experience. The work also faced some key engineering challenges. There was a difference of almost 30 meters between the highest point of the proposed canal and the lowest point. This meant that the construction team of the canal had to include a series of locks and gates, which helped to change the elevation of the water. These installed locks helped to let ships climb to the 30-meter peak before making their descent again. The construction of this great canal cost the United States a whopping $375 million, and to accommodate the inflation of today's world, that's a whopping $12 billion. Despite the multiple challenges faced during the construction of the canal, the Panama Canal was officially opened in August 1914 after over a decade of construction. The very first ship to travel across the canal was the SS Ancon, and this was a significant moment in history. Man would continue to evolve no matter the cost, and continue to find means to make life just a bit easier. The SS Ancon was the first of many to traverse the canal, and that year alone over 1,000 ships would use the canal, a number that has only risen ever since. Today, over 10,000 ships use the Panama Canal every year, working together to transport 500 million tons of goods. These ships pay a toll to use the canal. For a larger vessel, it can cost up to $500,000, but considering the cost it saves them in terms of traveling roundabout, the time it saves them in terms of cutting their trips short a couple of weeks, it can be considered money well spent. This canal changed the face and the game of global trade, and since then has stood as the only hegemon of trade traveling. But as of 2024, its position as the hegemon could be under threat, as it has some serious competition underway. That's right, people. It's time to talk about Mexico's interoceanic corridor, the new Tren Interoceanico, the interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. To understand the origins of this, we must travel back to the 19th century. That's around the time the United States started thinking about the Panama Canal, and as it turned out, they were not the only country exploring these kinds of ideas. In the year 1884, a powerful man became the president of Mexico. He went by the name José de la Cruz Porfirio Díaz Mori, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just call him de la Cruz. De la Cruz was from the state of Oaxaca on the southern coast of Mexico. When he came to power, he decided to build a railway line that would connect from Oaxaca to the coast of Veracruz in the north. In other words, he wanted to build a railway between the Atlantic and the Pacific, in the hopes of tackling the same crisis solved by the Panama Canal. This is something that not many people know about, but in the middle of 1907, 7 years earlier than the opening of the Grand Canal, this new railway, known as the Tren Interoceanico, officially opened its doors to the world. Over the next couple of years, hundreds of thousands of tons of goods were successfully moved along it. Mexico had started to thrive, its economy getting a much-needed boost as it found itself playing a much more central role in international trade. But this success was short-lived, and I'm guessing we already know why. The opening of the Panama Canal in 1914 saw ships switch to Panama instead, abandoning the Tren Interoceanico. In 1914, the amount of cargo traveling along the Mexican railway dropped by a third, and a year later it dropped by almost 80%. All this even though traveling along the train line through Mexico was faster than traveling through the Panama Canal. The Tren Interoceanico was closer to the United States, and it saved a good few days than the Panama Canal, so why would people ditch this for the canal? These are questions that were raised then. What could be the reason why? There were a few good reasons as to why. First, a lot of the shipping companies were American-based, and they preferred to support an American project as opposed to a Mexican rival. On top of that, the Mexico-American War had just broken out, and the violence scared a lot of countries who did not want their cargo and their people to get caught in the crossfire. Logically speaking, it's also simpler to use a shipping lane, not having to go through the stress of unloading cargo onto the trains. With such a massive drop in the traffic it received, the Tren Interoceanico became too expensive to maintain. It collapsed into despair, and it stayed that way for over 100 years until Mexico had another visionary leader like De la Cruz, López Obrador. So how does this visionary leader seek to change the face of the Tren Interoceanico? How does he hope to bring Mexico back to the forefront of global trade? What plans are in motion already? Unleashing Mexico's new rail line. The year is 2018, and Mexico's President López Obrador has made plans to redevelop Mexico's former railway line and create a new corridor between the Atlantic and the Pacific. This would serve as the modern rival to the nearby Panama Canal, with around $4.5 billion spent in developing it. The ambitious project was officially announced just a few months later, with plans for a trio of primary rail lines, Line Z, Line FA, and Line K. Work began in earnest in 2020, cutting back vegetation, pulling up old tracks, and replacing them with shiny new ones. The new railway is expected to be more than 1,000 kilometers long. Their plans do not end there. The Mexican government is also planning to build a series of industrial parks along the railway. López Obrador means business. In 2023, he sent the army to capture a stretch of old railway that was officially owned by a private company. He later offered compensation to the private company, but not without making sure that the stretch of railway was 100% in his government's hands. He could not afford to risk the failure of the plan because of a stubborn private company. There is no project without its challenges, and this time is no different. There have been a few clashes with protesters, including several groups from indigenous communities in Oaxaca. They are worried about the impact of the project on the environment. Due to the expanse of the railway, construction workers have been cutting down trees and, in turn, damaging local habitats. One group of protesters was supposedly imprisoned after they sprung an attack on construction workers with machetes. In other places, local families have been forcibly relocated. All of these events surrounding the construction of the railway have put people with mixed feelings, and to be honest, it is quite controversial. Many people believe that the negatives of the projects far outweigh the positives, while some have argued that there are a lot of positives for the negatives to be ignored. Experts believe that the reconstruction of the Tren Interoceánico will create 500,000 jobs for local people and attract up to $50 billion of international investment. This could transform the country's economy, and that is exactly what President López is hoping for. In August 2023, Line Z was officially completed. In September, López Obrador himself rode a passenger train from one end of the route to the other. The entire journey was less than 9 hours, making it officially faster than traveling through the Panama Canal. 2 months later, just a few days before Christmas, the trains opened their doors for the first time to the general public and started to transport people from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific. There is hope that the other 2 lines should be completed by the end of 2024. Despite the massive progress made, there is still a lot more to be done before the Tren Interoceánico can be used for international shipping. Another feature of the project is the total rehaul of the ports at both ends of the train lines to make them more suitable for cargo ships. This includes a giant breakwater at the port of Salina Cruz, which will consist of hundreds of thousands of rocks to shelter the harbor. These giant rocks are to reduce the possibility of cargo ships getting knocked over by storms and waves. Given that we have talked about the Panama Canal and the Tren Interoceánico, let us now check out other traveling canals around the world that make the transporting of cargo goods easier and faster, starting with the Suez Canal. The infamous Suez Canal. In 1858, Ferdinand de Lesseps formed the Suez Canal Company for the express purpose of building the canal. Construction of the canal lasted from 1859 to 1869. The canal officially opened on the 17th of November 1869. It offers vessels a direct route between the North Atlantic and Northern Indian Oceans via the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, avoiding the South Atlantic and Southern Indian Oceans and reducing the journey distance from the Arabian Sea to London by approximately 8,900 kilometers, 5,500 miles, to 10 days at 20 knots, 37 kilometers per hour, 23 miles per house, or 8 days at 24 knots, 44 kilometers per hour, 28 miles per hour. The canal extends from the northern terminus of Port Said to the southern terminus of Port Tawfiq in the city of Suez. In 2021, more than 20,600 vessels traversed the canal, an average of 56 per day. The original canal featured a single-lane waterway with passing locations in the Bala Bypass and the Great Bitter Lake. It contained, according to Alois Negrelli's plans, no locks, with seawater flowing freely through it. In general, the water in the canal north of the Bitter Lakes flows north in winter and south in summer. South of the lakes, the current changes with the tide at Suez. The canal was the property of the Egyptian government, but European shareholders, mostly British and French, owned the concessionary company that operated it until July 1956, when President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized it, an event that led to the Suez Crisis of October-November 1956. The canal is operated and maintained by the state-owned Suez Canal Authority, SCA, of Egypt, Under the Convention of Constantinople, it may be used in times of war as in times of peace by every vessel of commerce or of war without distinction of flag. Nevertheless, the canal has played an important military strategic role as a naval shortcut and choke point. Navies with coastlines and bases on both the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, Egypt and Israel, have a particular interest in the Suez Canal. After Egypt closed the Suez Canal at the beginning of the Six-Day War on 4th of June 1967, the canal remained closed for precisely 8 years, reopening on the 5th of June 1975. The Egyptian government launched construction in 2014 to expand and widen the Bala bypass for 35 kilometers, 22 miles, to speed up the canal's transit time. The expansion intended to nearly double the capacity of the Suez Canal from 49 to 97 ships per day. For $9 billion, this project was funded with interest-bearing investment certificates issued exclusively to Egyptian entities and individuals. The Suez Canal Authority officially opened the new side channel in 2016. This side channel, at the northern side of the east extension of the Suez Canal, serves the east terminal for berthing and unberthing vessels from the terminal. As the East Container Terminal is located on the canal itself, before the construction of the new side channel, it was not possible to berth or unberth vessels at the terminal while a convoy was running. Despite the construction challenges that could have been the result of the alleged difference in sea levels, the idea of finding a shorter route to the east remained alive. In 1830, General Francis Chesney submitted a report to the British government that stated that there was no difference in elevation and that the Suez Canal was feasible, but his report received no further attention. Lieutenant Waghorn established his overland route, which transported post and passengers to India via Egypt. Linant de Bellefonds, a French explorer of Egypt, became chief engineer of Egypt's public works. In addition to his normal duties, he surveyed the Isthmus of Suez and made plans for the Suez Canal. French Saint-Simonianism showed an interest in the canal, and in 1833, Barthélemy Prosper Enfantin tried to draw Muhammad Ali's attention to the canal but was unsuccessful. Alois Negrelli, the Italian-Austrian railroad pioneer, became interested in the idea in 1836. In 1846, Prosper Enfantin's Société d'études du Canal de Suez invited several experts, among them Robert Stevenson, Negrelli, and Paul-Adrien Bourdaloue, to study the feasibility of the Suez Canal with the assistance of Linant de Bellefonds. Bourdaloue's survey of the isthmus was the first generally accepted evidence that there was no practical difference in elevation between the two seas. Britain, however, feared that a canal open to everyone might interfere with its Indian trade and therefore preferred a connection by train from Alexandria via Cairo to Suez, which Stevenson eventually built. Whilst this canal operates from Africa, and the Panama Canal and Tren Interoceanico are both from North America, it is only right that a canal from Asia is on this list. The Grand Canal of China. The Grand Canal is the longest canal or artificial river in the world and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The oldest sections of what is now the Grand Canal were completed in the early 5th century BC to provide supplies and water routes for the states of Wu and Yue during the conflicts of China's spring and autumn period. The network was completed by Emperor Yang of the Sui in AD 609, linking the fertile Jiangnan region in the south to his capital at Luoyang in the west, and to his armies in the far north. His unsuccessful and unpopular wars and the massive amounts of conscripted labor involved in creating the canal were among the chief factors in the rapid fall of the Sui. But the connection of China's major watersheds and population centers proved enormously beneficial. Additional canals supplied Chang'an, now Xi'an, even further west under the Tang, while the main course became the economic hub of the empire. Periodic flooding of the Yellow River threatened the safety and functioning of the canal, while during wartime the river's high dikes were sometimes deliberately broken to delay or sweep away advancing enemy troops. Even so, restoration and improvement of the canal and its associated flood control works were assumed as a duty by each successive dynasty. The canal played a major role in periodically reuniting northern and southern China, and officials in charge of the canal and nearby saltworks grew enormously wealthy. Despite damage from floods, rebellions and wars, the canal's importance only grew with the removal of the capital to Khanbalik under the Mongol Yuan and to Beijing under the Yongle Emperor of the Ming and the Manchu Qing. Despite the importance of railways and roads in modern China, the People's Republic of China has worked to improve the navigability of the canal since the end of the Chinese Civil War, and the portion south of the Yellow River remains in heavy use by barges carrying bulk cargo. Increasing concern over pollution in China, and particularly the use of the Grand Canal as the eastern path of the South-North Water Diversion Project, intended to provide clean, potable water to the north, has led to regulations and several projects to improve water quality along the waterway. The greatest height on the canal is an elevation of 42 meters, 138 feet, above sea level, reached in the foothills of Shandong. Ships in Chinese canals did not have trouble reaching higher elevations after the Song official and engineer Qiao Weiyu invented the pound lock in the 10th century. The canal has been admired by many visitors throughout its history, including the Japanese monk Enin, 794–864, the Persian historian Rashid al-Din Hamadani, 1247–1318, the Korean official Choi Bu, 1454–1504, and the Italian missionary Matteo Ricci, 1552–1610. The Grand Canal nominally runs between Beijing and Hangzhou over a total length of 1,794 kilometers, 1,115 miles. However, only the section from Hangzhou to Liangshan County is currently navigable. Its course is today divided into 7 sections. From south to north, these are the Jiangnan Canal, the Li Canal, the Inner Canal, the Middle Canal, the Lu Canal, the South Canal, the North Canal, and the Tonghui River. Lake Lianhu was used to feed water to the Grand Canal section near Jiangnan. Since the canal was man-made, there was not enough naturally flowing water to keep the canal at proper depth so that boats could travel through it. So a man-made lake was used to feed water to the Jiangnan section of the Grand Canal. It was protected by the government from reclamation, and any use of the lake water without proper taxation was deemed illegal. It was supposed to be protected from profitable exploitation, but because the government changed over the years, Lake Lianhu had been reclaimed many times, and it started to become more shallow. The government changed the lake to become more profitable farmland, which led to reclamations and agricultural irrigation using the lake. This began to lead to Lake Lianhu not being able to properly feed water to the Grand Canal. Loss of depth due to reclamation and maintenance costs became too high for the lake to become practical to use. Even though it was a man-made lake, it was still a beautiful sight. Many different people praised its beauty, and various poems have been written about the lake. In recent years, recreational uses for the lake have become more popular and may lead to the lake being restored. The size of the Grand Canal makes it the largest canal in the world, and the next canal on the list does not hold a candle to the Grand Canal in terms of size or history, the ancient Corinth Canal. It connects the Gulf of Corinth of the Ionian Sea and the Saronic Gulf of the Aegean Sea. The channel passes through the narrow Isthmus of Corinth and separates the Peloponnese from mainland Greece. Transport is of no importance due to its width of only 21 meters. The canal connects the Gulf of Corinth to the Saronic Gulf in the Aegean Sea. Construction of the canal began in 1881 and completed in 1893. It is the deepest and narrowest channel in the world. Currently, the canal is almost not used due to the increase in the size of the ships. Ships have continued to go bigger and bigger, and the bigger they get, the more out of use this canal becomes. Let us hope that such is not the case for the next canal on the list. Kiel Canal, Nord-Ostsee Canal. The North Sea-Baltic Canal, commonly called the Kiel Canal, after the German city of Kiel, past which it is laid, is considered one of the main waterways in Germany. Now about 250 ships from different countries of the world pass through the canal per day. it is considered the busiest waterway in Europe. From the day of opening until 1948, the canal bore the name of the Prussian king, Kaiser Wilhelm Canal. The popularity of the waterway increased every year. After all, the path along the new hydraulic structure not only shortened the path by 700 kilometers, but also made it safer. Now ships do not have to cross the difficult section of the Jutland Peninsula, Denmark, Germany. The navigable route connecting the Baltic and North Seas took 8 years to build, involved 9,000 workers. 10 bridges have been thrown across the canal and 12 crossings are open around the clock. Airlocks are installed on both sides to ensure safety during high tides. Considering that this is the busiest waterway in Europe and it does just 250 ships per day, we can only hope that the next one on this list is a bit more impressive. White Sea-Baltic Canal. The White Sea-Baltic Sea Canal, also called the White Sea Canal, is an important waterway that originates in the White Sea and runs through northern Russia to the Baltic Sea. Despite the size of the canal, less than 2 years were spent on its construction, and the prisoners of the Gulag worked on its construction. The White Sea Canal became one of the greatest engineering and construction projects in the USSR. Has 19 gateways. A historical and cultural complex is currently located based on the White Sea-Baltic Canal. It includes a system of closely related hydraulic structures and administrative and residential buildings. Monuments erected in honor of the lost builders are located along the sea route. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another of our interesting videos.